Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. Among other things, I am a woman on a mission to demystify the Zettelkasten so that you can have the Zettelkasten of your dreams sitting on your work table beside you and delivering to you great insight. Well, today's video comes from a conversation over in LiLLiPub in the Circle for Zettelkasten, and Tom was asking about directory cards. He gave an example with some card numbers, and after putting a few of them down, he said, doesn't this seem like an awful lot of directory cards? So that's what this topic is about, the value of having a directory card in a Zettelkasten. Why do you want one? Why does the Effortless numbering system suggest that you make them? And what value do they serve? So let's take a look, and we'll take a look over in the down-facing camera. I have an example set up that I hope will show you why this is so valuable. See you there. Okay, this is a card that I pulled to help a fellow anti-netter, Kip, with his Zettelkasten. His is just barely getting off the ground. He has about 50 main cards, but he hasn't filed any of them yet. And we're kind of workshopping him to help him get going. So this is an example of a main card that I pulled to give him the 4 fields on a main card that are super important, and in the hopes that I can also share with him how I go about bringing a new main card into my system. Well, in the process, it turned out to be a really fine example of what I was trying to talk to Tom about regarding the value of a directory. So it serves 2 purposes. So let's go through this particular main card, and we'll very, very briefly, let's touch on the 4 elements that must be on a main card before you begin to file it. And those elements are as follows. There's the author's contribution, what you gained from the source. There's your response, how you reacted to what you read. There's the nature of the source. This was Peter Kreeft's Doors in the Walls of the World. And then there's the all-important tagline, whose purpose is to bring back to memory the entire contents of this card. Now here I'm going to sidetrack just a little bit for Kip, because Kip said that he noticed that I have a title on each card. And I want to emphasize that this isn't a title, this is a tagline which serves as a memory prompt phrase. A title for this card might well be Plato's Invisible Realities. Now imagine you were walking out of a class on philosophy where you were talking all about Plato, and a group of people were standing in the hallway and you were joining the conversation. And when it was your turn to speak, could you pipe up and say, Plato's Invisible Realities? They'd all look at you like you were nuts. Well, what is it you want to say about Plato's invisible realities? Well, that's what we're building into our Zettelkasten is conversations. But you could say when it was your turn to speak, but are Plato's invisible realities just mental abstractions? Now you'd get a conversation going. And that is the value of those taglines, because what you want to have happen inside your Zettelkasten are conversations. Now here is the tie into the directory. That's exactly what you get on a directory card. And we will revisit that in just a moment as we see how this card gets placed and why it joins the directory that it joins and how that is going to shape up in the future, because this is another issue that comes up time and time again with a question of categories or connections, which is predominant. This clearly falls in a category, which is the big category is philosophy, which might be in an even bigger category if you're depending on whose system you're using for categories. And then under that, probably the philosophy from antiquity and Plato's view of reality, and you would nestle it all the way down till where you fit that title. Plato's invisible realities would click right into a specific slot in a category. But again, I say that becomes a very dead thing because, okay, it's the only thing in its little particular exact slot where it goes, but that doesn't inspire any kind of a thought process or a conversation. So instead, what happened to this card when it was originally filed? Well, at that point in time, I had no section in my Zettelkasten whatsoever on philosophy. I did have some interesting things on language because my original thought in my Zettelkasten was that I was going to pursue linguistics. So my card, the best card that this thing could fit with, had to do with that key term reality, where it tied in with another card, obviously of ancient vintage, where there's no, for instance, there's no tagline here. There is a source, the Language Transfer Project, and this is actually my response. And the thought from the author was that languages force us to interpret the world and interpret reality in their own ways. And if we really want to come to an understanding of a language and to be able to work fluently in the language, we need to discover how the language interprets reality. So that card joined this conversation. And the way this conversation had been abstracted in my directory was with this tagline: languages require to perceive reality their way. Okay, so now this card already had one following card. Again, obviously an immature card. This goes back to July 17th of 2022, quite a long time ago, and it's completely a personal reflection on languages. And here I'm pondering what happens to language themselves when they evolve over how they see reality over time. And so that got abstracted in my index with the following phrase: languages evolve in how they see the world. I should probably come back and write this on the top of the card, but I'm kind of tending to leave these in their historical, just as they were for history. I mean, I think it does help me see how my Zettelkasten has evolved. So now this card came in as the next one in the series, 3E, 3A-2. There's a number of things for Tom's question about directories and why they're useful. There's two main utilities showing here. The key one is the conversation. That's the singular most important part, because a Zettelkasten is ultimately a collection of conversations. And here we have a whole interesting conversation. And you can almost picture three people standing in a group talking about this. Well, one says, well, languages require us to perceive reality their own way. And the next person pops up and says, yeah, but that's continually changing now, isn't it? And then another one might say, well, I don't know, Plato seems to think that reality is an element out in the universe somewhere, and that what we think we see as reality are just abstractions. So there's a really interesting conversation happening here, even though this isn't philosophy. It's not in the category of philosophy. It's just where it linked in. And I think where it linked in is a very powerful conversation. And I would be completely comfortable in having all of philosophy grow up under 3E3A. That would not bother me in a bit, one tiny bit, even though this began as a category on linguistics. So that is one aspect of why directory cards are so valuable. They summarize conversations. When there's only a single child card, you can see the conversation happen just by the two cards sitting next to one another. This card will immediately sit behind this card, and you can do something like this with the two cards and see the conversation happening. As soon as you add another card, however, cards can begin to intersperse, because this one will grow and have cards coming under it. And then now the three ideas are becoming more and more distant from one another in the physical cards of the Zettelkasten. And so it's very helpful to have all three together in one place. Also, having all three together in one place relieves the pressure to say, oh, but this one should come first. It doesn't matter, they're all right next to one another. Who cares who comes first? But there's also a practical benefit in this. Back when I was making this, adding this card to my Zettelkasten, all I knew was that its best first match, the card it wanted for its parent, was this card. I did not yet know what number this was going to be. I just knew it was going to come off of this card. I could tell just by pulling 2 cards from my box that this card had to be 3E3A-2. This and the card that came right after it. Now, if I get another card that chooses this card as its parent, again, I will only have to pull 2 cards because this card now will directly follow this card. And as soon as I pull this card, I can see that 1 and 2 are taken and my new child card of this card will be 3. So as your Zettelkasten grows, if I just have this card, and all of its child cards, and then I dig through those and get to this card, and now I've got to dig through all of its child's cards and then come up with something that, oh, nope, it's 3B. Oh, okay, well that means that 3 is free. You end up having to dig and dig and dig. So suddenly, besides the very powerful conversation that's going on, this can be a big time saver. So that was a little topic that turned out to cover a whole bunch of key important things in your effortless numbering system. Conversations are the ruling thing. Save conversations, not titles. Titles are dead. Titles do not promote conversation, and it's the conversations that engage your associative brain, because your associative brain loves making associations. It's your associative brain that tells you what you're going to add to the conversation when you're standing among people. If that's coming out of your cognitive brain, then you aren't listening to what other people are saying. You're just composing what you're going to say next. That's the difference between a genuine conversation and when is it my turn to monologue? Think about it. If you're pondering what you're going to say, you're thinking with your cognitive brain, you're not hearing. If you're listening and hearing and engaging with the people around you, what you want to say will be inspired and it will come out whole and you won't have to compose. And that same concept is taking place inside your Zettelkasten when you use a full, complete idea for the tagline of your card. Then, of course, you put it on the directories so that the conversation can continue to take place. And it also gives you some convenience for when it's time to add another card to the conversation. So I hope all of those little points help make this a little bit more solidified into the really, really, really powerful system that it is. This is part of why your Zettelkasten will start talking back to you. And I didn't follow it up, but over in my feed in YouTube, there was one popped up saying that, oh, the voice in the box is a lie. I didn't follow it down, so I don't really know where they were going with it. But I would say the voice in the box becomes more and more fluent, more and more coherent, more and more valuable to the degree to which you feed it conversation. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.